And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 76 of Global Citizens. My name is Calvin. I am the show's host, and of course, I'm also its creator. So, my guest for today, you might have seen her around some of the other TCK podcasts or any other live stream from some of my show's alumni, in fact. So, my guest for today is Ngoc Nguyen, or Ngoc Nguyen, as she says it's okay for me to call her that.
Yes.
So, Ngọc is actually an author. She is the author of Weird Culture Kids, her first ever brain baby. So Ngọc was
Yay.
born in Moscow, Russia, raised in Hanoi, Vietnam, which is her passport country, I suppose, and
Yes, correct.
educated at international French school for 12 years. So at the age of 15, she moved to the United States to attend a very Connecticut boarding school, and ever since, she has been asking a simple question, yet something that has plagued all of us third culture kids, and that is, where are you from? So without further ado, I will now pass the platform back to her, and we will let this amazing lady share about her story. So, well, how are you?
Hi, Calvin. I'm good, thank you. How are you? Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Well, physically, I'm well. Whereas for my country, we have several mishaps. For one thing, we already have a plane crash, and this morning, apparently, we have an earthquake.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay. Very turbulent life, I see. I hope it doesn't
well,
affect you too much.
it's a Tuesday for us. Oh, it's a Saturday.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a Saturday. So,
hmm
yay. Right, not to worry,
Super.
not to worry. All right.
Yeah.
So, right.
So,
So we will now jump into the very, very first question. And
mhm,
yes, as a customary for a TCK,
mhm.
you are going to be asked that uncomfortable question. And that is, where are you from?
Yes.
And just to make it a little bit more interesting, yeah. It's I will ask on what is the where are you from most geographically. This is going to be a little bit challenging to you. Okay.
Yeah. Wait, where am I from geographically?
As in to say is, where do you feel most geographically at home?
Okay. Yes. Woof. Okay, that's an extremely difficult question. Um, I would tell you that like my usual answer would be these days, and it's like literally, and I think it's a question that I've been dealing with my whole life, of course, and that I talk at length in my book Weird Culture Kids, because it's such a difficult question. Sorry for me to answer, and essentially, to give you a quick answer, I would say I'm from Vietnam, but right. Sorry, and there's always going to be like that but part, like followed by many different variations depending on who I'm talking to, who whether I have time, which audience. So for today's answer, my answer would simply be yes, I'm from Vietnam, but I've been educated in the French system since the age of 3, and I've lived most of my life outside of Vietnam, so between Europe and the States. Does
All
that
right.
does that answer your question? Is that an
Uh,
acceptable answer?
it's acceptable. For one thing, is because typically the answer will be people will refer more to their friends and family is where they feel most belonging. So okay,
Mm-hmm.
I accept
Yeah,
that. I accept that.
yeah.
Don't worry. All right. So yeah. Okay. So now before we dive into to your life as a TCK. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So okay. Okay, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on what has been a challenge to you while growing up?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you feel the issue comes more where as an adult, as compared to you growing up as a kid? Because
Yeah.
I recall you actually have an older brother and he's also
I,
a TCK, right? But he
yes.
seems to adjust to it quite better compared to
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, much better. And I think he transitioned into a non-TCK now. But that's just my theory. I can't speak for him. Of course, I can tell you more about my own experience growing up as a TCK. Um, where to even start. So as I said, I was enrolled in the French system, right, since a very young age, and I'm not sure whether you're familiar with the different systems. Say, like if you compare like the French system to a Anglo-Saxon, like an English or American or Canadian for it, the system is very different. It is different in the sense where once a newcomer comes into the school who does not belong to that culture, so say I wasn't French, well, I'm still not French, but as in, when I was enrolled in the International French School as a Vietnamese student, the process that that non-French students go through is called the assimilation process, right? So you're being assimilated into the culture. Whereas in an English system, it is more the multicultural system. So the big difference is that, and it's still it's a very political debate today. It's still going on in France and around the world, because France is the only country, it's the only system that uses assimilation. So what does that mean, right? It's like you go into the system, and if you want to be part of that system, say in this particular case, the French system, you can't be a bit of both, as like
Yep.
you just have like very let's say concrete criteria for you to adhere to, for you to value, for you to understand, and then you eventually through the process become French, or become assimilated. Whereas in an American system or like a British system, it's much more about multiculturalism. So it could be I can keep parts of my Vietnamese self and then incorporate these new ideals, right, principles of the American system, of the British systems into my being, and that can coexist. So for that reason, I think like in the States, and I will base a lot of my kind of like my answers on the States, on the American model, because I used to live there for a very long time and understand it quite well. You have a lot of kind of hybrid identities, right? So you can say, oh, I'm French American, or I'm Vietnamese American. You can have that duality, or even like sometimes you have like hybrid, like, so many hyphenated identities, right?
Yep.
Whereas in France, you just say, oh, I'm French. And like, unless your parents are, you're the product of a biracial couple, then you can split kind of like that identity. You can explain further. It's like, oh, like my dad is X and my mom is X. So I'm going into this very kind of like long explanation just to tell you that as I was growing up, I did have a very strong kind of conflict, because from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. while I'm at school, I'm told that I can only speak French at school. Most of the people who surrounded me are French people, because back at that time, the International French School was extremely small. And not a lot of Vietnamese kids were enrolled in, at least in my time when I started. And then, of course, like the numbers grow exponentially. But yeah, so I did feel extremely French while I was growing up, at least from like 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then when I come home to my parents, who are more in the traditional household, I'm constantly reminded by my parents that I'm not French. They'd be like, oh, Ngoc, but you're Vietnamese. Like, don't forget you're Vietnamese. And this is how Vietnamese people do it. As if they kind of knew, that somehow putting me in the international school, I would be losing my roots, for lack of better words. So yes, I had a lot, like major conflict growing up. But I think during that age, because I was surrounded by French people all the time, all of my best friends are French, I felt French, so I kind of like gravitated towards that identity much more. And then at the age of 15, and I described this very in details in the book, when I moved to the States, I realized that, from one day to the next, I completely lost my French identity, because people kind of, they saw me, they saw the way that I look, a Southeast Asian woman, and the only identity that I got was, or that they expected from me, was the Vietnamese one,
Yep.
So that was super hard. I think that was like the peak of my crisis as a TCK, because nobody saw me the way that I saw myself, and that was quite troubling.
Yeah, we actually had a really interesting discussion with some of the TCK groups actually.
Mm-hmm.
So one way to define us is because firstly is we define by our internal culture, the culture at home, the culture outside, which is your neighborhood, like what you said, like what happened growing up in France. And the last one is your internal culture, who you are, that you are formed by all of the different cultures. So I think this is something that people may not realize it, but because the thing was because the term TCK came from the children of those from in immigrant backgrounds, such as, for example, maybe second generations, or even like, for example, the missionary kids, the business brats. So actually, this becomes the initial form of TCK, but throughout the years, as Dr. Ruth Hill Unsim and Dr. Ruth Van Raken has stated, is that the term will continue changing. And when she was on my show, she has stated that the book that we call the Bible, which she as the co-author, she says, please stop calling it the Bible. It's because Bible doesn't change. Whereas
Yeah.
the book, there is the book, and the definition of TCK will be updated. They will keep on growing, and yeah, I think this is something that we have to see as we
Yeah.
grow, as the time passes. All
Yeah.
right. So for those of you who just tuned in for the very first time, so Global Citizens is an online live stream that is done weekly. So for me, this is in order to invite and advocate third culture kids in order for them to tell their stories. And of course, I've invited global citizens of multiple profiles. So why is this so? Is because I want people to understand that those who grow up, live overseas, and or live those two lifestyles, it's not an extended vacation for us. Because like what Ngoc has already said already,
Yeah.
is that she has to learn assimilation. She has to learn how to ingratiate herself with her own family culture and dealing with an outside culture. So I want people to understand what is the difference, and hope this is something that people will be able to learn as time passes. All right. So
That's a great initiative.
yeah, sorry.
That's a great initiative. So thanks. Thanks for
Thank
doing
you.
this.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this is for you guys, TCK. So yeah, we will pass the platform back again to our dear guest today. So all right. Okay. So I want to ask you two questions, and this has to be balanced to each other out.
Mm.
What has been your biggest blessing as a TCK?
My
And
biggest
yet,
blessing or my biggest lesson?
blessing.
Blessing. Okay.
And just to balance it out, what do you feel has also been the biggest curse as a TCK?
Whew, very charged, very emotionally charged questions.
Thank
Uh,
you. If it's easy, everybody would have done that.
yes. So say to blessings, lots of blessings, and lots of blessings. But do you want me to name only one, eh? Or can I do
You can say as
several
much as you want. Not
that
worry.
like are connected? Okay. So in terms of blessing, well, first of all, I cannot. I think the most obvious ones, right, would be like the ability to speak many different languages and to live in many different cultures. I think that in and of itself is the biggest blessing, even though maybe when, as I was growing up, I was struggling a lot with the different languages that I was trying to learn. But in the end of the day, it is a huge blessing to be able to communicate with so many people in so many different languages. Because I think also the languages, right, kind of when you use a language, I think you become slightly different versions of yourself that you get access to. And I think the most authentic way to connect with someone is truly through their mother tongue,
Yeah.
whatever that is, right? Because I think I consider also English my mother tongue, even though it's my third language, but I'm most comfortable in it. So I think like by speaking different languages, you can connect with a person or several people through different levels of intimacy, depending on how fluent or how comfortable they are with the language. So that in of itself is a huge blessing in life. The ability, like I've said, to live in many different cultures, to understand the different nuances, to understand, the differences, but also the similarities between different cultures, different societies, which results, I believe, in a very specific position when, I don't necessarily, I think, when attending what people call debates, I don't necessarily think they are debates. I think there's just discussions. Like I don't think that there's, I think if a blessing as a TCK, it's also to be able to say, oh, like, I see, I understand this point of view, but I also understand the other one, and they don't necessarily go into conflict. As other people might see and might believe it to be. So there's that. Understanding people. on, I don't want to say deeper level because it sounds almost arrogant to say that, but in, you know, like people with different kind of like cultural backgrounds, if you can spot the different backgrounds that reside in them, you can understand them better, I think. So be once again, to be less conflictive. So those are like obviously the most kind of the biggest blessings in life, I think, as a TCK. And then in terms of curse, because you know, big blessings also comes with, I want to say like big responsibilities, but then in this case, curses, right? There are a lot as well that I didn't necessarily, I couldn't necessarily put them into words until I start writing the writing process of my book. So one of them that I can name right now and that I would love to get rid of, you know, is the curse of constantly missing something, right? Of constantly, I don't think there's one specific moment, especially in moments of joy, in moments of happiness, where I'm not missing either someone or wishing someone was there to experience it with me, because I'm like, oh, like this person would have loved this. So constantly missing someone, having your most loved ones super far away from you, or like in so many different places that yeah, that's like hard to pinpoint, you know. Like sometimes I think about it, say home, right? My parents' home in Vietnam. I come back and it's not the same feeling because all of my friends are gone now and I don't have a lot of friends in Vietnam anymore. So, you know, building again and again and again new relationships, which has its perks, don't get me wrong, but a lot of time I think it's more of a weight than anything. And feeling misunderstood a lot of time, you know, feeling very misunderstood, feeling as if like I'm constantly changing between, you know, like one thing or the other, like saying, and this is very like a very kind of banal story that I'm going to share with you, but say growing up in Vietnam, Vietnamese people, including myself, so I'm putting myself in this Vietnamese people category, believe in how to say, in fortune telling. Okay. So like we go, like we see these like fortune telling like masters who kind of tell us like, oh, like your this year is going to be like this and that, you know, like they read our charts, etc. But then when I'm in the Western countries, right, it's unthinkable. Like I'm the most rational person ever. I'm like the most scientifically proven. Like if you tell me like something, like show me the proofs, right? These are conflicting things, right? And like, yeah. But I believe in both of them. I do sincerely, and it's very hard when I'm being questioned on it. You know, like where some of my newer friends who probably don't know me as well would be like, oh, but Ngoc, like how can you believe in two completely opposite things? You know, like you're the most rational person I know, and the next thing you're like turning into this witch, you know, and talking to me about the stars and like the constellations and all of these. So it's very hard to explain. So that would also be a curse. But yeah, like constantly being like maybe not always misunderstood, but not fully understood. Having to explain a lot of time, and
yeah, been there. Yeah, been there.
Yeah, I'm sure all of us been there for that. Like, yeah.
Yeah. For those who is watching this, Ngoc friends, please take note. You guys are putting her in the spot. So please don't do that. All right, let's get in. Okay.
Stop doing that.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned the part on the blessing one. One of my earliest guests is actually an expat who has lived in Beijing most of his life. I think he is an Italian, however, and he has been there for even a lot longer than I've been alive.
Yeah.
And he speaks fluent Mandarin, by the way. It's very embarrassing for me since. Yeah,
it's a very difficult language. I tried to for like 2-3 years because I'm like, how hard can it be? It was like pretty hard.
Yeah, it's really, really hard. So Dad, please take note of highlighting about that to me. Okay. I mentioned about that is because I think that there's a certain similarity with what you have experienced, is because for him being an Italian is that they are incredibly passionate, they are incredibly expressive, whereas in China at that time is because they are more conservative in the way they approach. So when there was an argument one time, and he actually burned a lot of bridges at that time. It's because he didn't understand the method of communications. So
Mm.
as a result, the contrasting style of speaking resulted in some issue. So yeah, I'm really glad that you highlighted that. I think this is something that makes the difference between seeing how people communicate, for example, on online and when you are
Mhm.
in person.
Yeah.
So recently, I created something called the 3G theory. So
Okay.
they are the short for firstly is globalization, followed by generational difference, and then afterwards is gadgetry access. So I guess it's because when you see the life of people overseas, such as through Netflix or any other
Mhm.
streaming kind of platform, you thought that, oh, okay, so people overseas live that way. But when you are living there, like for the case of a TCK, you understand that there's so much more complexity, there's so much deeper layer in it.
Mm.
And I guess this is something that people has to take note of, especially now moving forward in the future, is because, well, the world is becoming more globalized. We are a lot more connected through technology.
Right.
However, the thing is that we always want to defend our own personal culture. We want to
Mhm.
defend our own upbringing. But the thing is that, well, if let's say the person B is the one that is going to get you your money and is going to prevent you from getting into a lawsuit, I think you really need to know what is the difference between how an upbringing is and the difference between culture, and you need to respect which of the ground that you are focusing on.
Right. I totally agree.
All right. So yeah. All right. So I think I have given up a lot of emotionally driven question. So of course,
Yes.
to be fair, of course, we have to. I want to give her now the time to, of course, share her books. So one question though, why is it called the Weird Culture Kids? Why can't
Yes.
it be Unique Culture Kids? We are not weird
Yes.
people.
Yes, I agree. And I've actually, like, to be honest, I've had like a lot of questions about this throughout like my whole writing process. I had like better readers, my editors are telling me, oh, like, you know, like the title, Weird Culture Kids. It's kind of shocking. It's almost like, you know, it's like getting in your face kind of thing, right? For several reasons, I'll tell you. So I just want to go back to first of all the roots of it, right? Like the concept of a TCK, a third culture kid. I grew up not really like I've heard of the term when I was much younger, when I was my teenage years, and I never thought that I was part of that of the TCK tribe, let's say, because to my understanding, like like the word, the term third culture kid was to talk about my expat friends. You know, as I was living in my passport country, like I'm supposedly at home. Uh, and so I didn't think that I belonged into that cool group of like TCKs, right? And so it's just like, okay, like they're TCKs, I'm not. And so as I was growing up, I've noticed like this like completely constant like conflict, like I've told you before, like between my French and my Vietnamese identity, and later on, like even my American self. I asked myself a lot of different questions. And the thing is, the term that came out of it is like, is the weird term. It's because I felt weird my entire life. You know, I felt weird in the sense where people ask you, hey, where are you from? Most of the people that I know, it's just like straightforward, hey, I'm from here. You know, like I'm from this country, I'm from that country, I'm from this town, that town. I didn't really have that one answer that I can give, right? Like I'll be like, oh, I'm from Vietnam, but let me tell you my entire life, and maybe you can tell me where I fit in, you know? Kind of that sensation. And yeah, and like I can't tell you how, like the number of occasions, of moments where I couldn't enter a conversation because I didn't really know how to, because I felt very out of place, or you know, like, and I'll give you a very silly example, even up until my university days, you know, when I'm like literally it's that time when I'm like trying to like figure out who I am as a person. I go to school, and then it was an American liberal arts school, so you have many different kind of like societies and clubs to enter, right? And then you have the French club, and then you have the Vietnamese club, and I'm just like, but eh, I didn't sign up to any of them because I'm like, okay, like I'm going to go to the French club and say, what, hi, I speak French. Like I'm not even French, you know. I didn't have the legitimacy or like the authority to kind of like bring myself to sign up for it. And then same thing with Vietnamese club. I'm like, can't really go there. Like I don't know anything about Viet. Like I look Vietnamese and I have the language, but like once they speak to me, probably they figure out like that I'm not Vietnamese, like that Vietnamese after all, and like that I shouldn't be there because I don't feel that patriotic at that time, anyways. So again, like I didn't belong to any club, I was just like, oh, I'm just feeling weird, and of course a lot of it's like self-imposed, because I don't think anybody's going to make me pass like a Vietnamese test, anything. But so that's why like the word weird is so kind of, it's so like prominent in my life. I'm just like, oh, like I've had a weird life, like growing up, like I like not a lot of people like move around as much as I did, and I think it's also like the reason why I moved around so much. Was because I couldn't, like I was looking for myself. I moved to Australia. Like I end up like in college, I end up doing a master in Spanish literature and language, because I'm like, okay, like let me like move to Spain and figure out what them like a lot of weird things cross my head. And so, long story short, that's the reason why I decided to call the book Weird Culture Kids, because it is a kind of like a weird culture, where a weird culture versus like the more standardized culture that we know today, like the nation state kind of culture, right? Like, so you have like the Indonesian culture, the Vietnamese culture. It's very separated, like, and I'm trying to take cultures, like bits and pieces of all these different cultures that I've encountered, be it the French one, the American, the Vietnamese, the Spanish, because I lived there for a while, like all these things put together, and yeah, and that's how Weird Culture Kids, like the writing process, the idealization process came in place, and that's how the title came. And personally, and we can have a debate about this, but personally, I don't take I no longer, shall I say, take the term weird negatively, like I'm like, okay, weird is kind of like unique, it's special, it's cool, like, yeah. Does that answer your
Okay.
question?
We actually jump to my next question, but it's fine. No, no, I get that. I get that. When I was younger, growing up in Singapore, I used to call myself the citizens of Earth.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and over the time, I call myself global citizens, which is why the title of the show
Mm-hmm.
and why the spelling is a little funky, if you want to call it, is because I
Yeah.
don't want to get into a lawsuit by some of the organization with the
Mm-hmm.
exact same name.
Okay. Oh, that's
Yeah.
fine. All right.
Oh no, wait. Oh, you were thinking about that too, weren't you? Okay, fair enough. But yeah, I get it. I get it. The thing is because when you, maybe it's of course the different age where it also affect that is because I left my home country when I was 11 years old. I grew up through my earliest formative years during my teenage years in a foreign country, which is a melting pot of culture in its own rights. You've
Right.
been in Singapore before, so you know how it is.
Yeah.
So to me, I lived there for over a decade. I thought that was my identity. Then
Mm-hmm.
the fact that even then I can't fit in through its entire custom fully. So
Yeah.
when I returned back to my supposed passport country, it became a challenge again. It's because okay, why aren't you guys doing this in the way that is would have made it more sensible?
Of
But
course.
there are certain, I mean, when you are in other people's turf, you have to play by their own rules, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
whereas for yourself, I think for like France and Vietnam itself are two very different things. And then afterwards, you decided to okay, let's find where I belong. In fact, I think that is the third in third culture kids should be in the future, and that is we find a third custom that we constantly look for in order to
Mm-hmm.
fit in.
Yeah, but do you think we'll ever find it? Because I haven't found it. Like I just name it like weird culture and like decide like this is what it is, and I might as well
No,
embrace it. But
I don't think we will ever find it. And with all due respect, I don't ever want to find it. With
okay,
all due respect, I don't ever want to find it. It's
why is
because,
that?
well, for one thing, is that, well, while we grow up in a nation, we are taught to love it, and well,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we do, maybe we don't. I mean, everybody have a different style of upbringing, yeah. But the
Right.
thing is at the end of the day, who should define yourself is you, not by not by the flags that you are born under, not by your passport. In fact, there are some people with multiple passports because they have dual citizenships.
Mm-hmm.
So I think is that if you are not defined by one country or one nationality, or in fact by one custom, it
Mm-hmm.
allows you to belong everywhere. I think that is something that we humans should do moving forward. For one thing, is in this pandemic, even though there's a lot of mishaps, for example, there's also a lot of blessings. We see a lot of countries working together, and we didn't expect that would ever happen, but they do. It's
Right.
because, well, everybody is handling the same kind of issue. So I think a global understanding and a global kind of, I say, unity is something that had to be encouraged moving forward.
Yeah, I agree to that, but I don't necessarily agree on the fact that you can belong to so many different places. Like, as in, I do think that I belong to several places, but I don't belong entirely, right? So,
Yeah.
say, like, typical example, like with the Vietnamese club and the French club, I do think that I belong to both clubs, you know?
Yep.
But did I sign up to those clubs? No, because I don't think I fully belong to there, and like I have
Yep.
the authority to actually do so. But again, I agree that it's a very kind of like personal. It changes from one person to the next. Yeah.
Uh, Personally, to me, like I think in my university before there's an Indonesian club,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't want to join it. The reason being is that if I come back to, of course, at that time was because I thought I know my passport country well enough, even though I
Uh
lived
huh.
away from it for years or
Yeah.
decades to be specific. I
Mm.
thought if I come back there, I'm just gonna learn something that I thought I already know. Why would I want to do that? I want to
Yeah.
explore more possibilities. I want to meet people of different culture,
Right.
because when I can understand what is going on at that time. Of course, this was before I know the term TCK on its own.
Uh huh.
So this is something that at that time was, in a sense, a little bit controversial when I told some
Mm-hmm.
of my friends and some of the people who actually asked me to join the club.
Yeah.
But to me at that time was, to me is, I don't think it's a necessity that if I know and I'm supposed to belong to a certain culture that I have to be completely there. I
Right.
think
Right. Right.
so. Yeah. Okay.
That's a
Just
good
to
realization.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, just just for a little shout out. So Kevin is actually a big fan of your book.
Hello,
So
Kevin. I am
yes,
so I am so flattered.
yes. In case you guys haven't seen it in my Instagram story, there's somebody who says he is a big fan of Ngoc's book, and
Yeah.
that's the gentleman here.
Wow. Wow. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for your support.
All right. All right. So yeah, so we actually will carry on with the questions.
Yeah.
And yeah, I actually will ask you something that is a little bit fun in a sense, a little bit abstract.
Finally, Calvin, something fun.
Really? It wasn't fun previously? Oh,
I'm just kidding.
yeah. All right. So, if you can create a character, maybe even a series or even a movie
Hmm.
that you feel can help you to advocate or even to explain what you are as a TCK, you can consider the time frame is moving forward,
Uh-huh.
or even when you were younger. What would
Hmm.
you want to create?
Okay. That's a very good question. I think I will definitely want to kind of create a series about uh, the international school systems, okay, and like with characters of TCK characters, if that makes sense, or if does that answer your question?
No, it
Like,
actually. I think you know this gentleman. He was on my show or in the past. A good friend of mine. His name is Dan Nguyen.
yes, I
So
do.
yeah, for Dan's case, he actually wanted to create a school for hospitality, because to him, in hospitality school is where all the international kind of personalities and characters actually
Mm-hmm.
get to mingle. So
Yeah.
I guess that's a good thing moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
I guess. So I guess you guys share the same thing. Is this something to do with the fact that you guys are both Vietnamese?
I don't know. It could be, or it could just
Does
be
it have
like
something to do with that?
maybe we'll have to
Okay.
like dig deeper.
All right.
But no, I was just thinking about that because as I was growing up, like I had there's a lot of like different series. I'm going to name you like Gossip Girl, this kind of things. Or like they go to school and they're all like these American girls, and like like we as TCKs don't have that kind of like role models, if you can call them role models,
Yeah.
but like people to look up to, right? To be like, oh, like they're just as weird as us, or like they're just as culturally confused as us, to tell us that, oh, it's okay, it's like it's fine, like you have like these kind of people everywhere. So definitely a series of international high schools, or like even like in universities, like where you have like a very diverse student body. I think also like Dan, who thought of like hospitality school, I would be thinking of like, because I'm very biased, I studied international relations, and in my international relations kind of degree, like a lot of people also had the same background. So yeah, like definitely a series about third culture kids, weird culture kids, people who don't necessarily belong to any kind of nation state paradigm.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree about that. There's actually a lot of celebrities, in a sense, who are TCKs.
Mm.
President Barack Obama, the late Kobe Bryant, and there's actually a lot of them. But the problem is that it was never explicitly stated that they are TCKs. I
Mm.
mean, for President Barack Obama, with the utmost respect to him, people acknowledge him as the first African American president. It's
Mm.
not that he's the first TCK president. Dr. Ruth actually highlighted to me that at that time, John McCain is actually also a TCK. He actually
Really?
grew up in Panama. So I'm like, okay, I did not
Mm.
know that.
Yeah.
And there's actually a lot of it, but there's never a plus outright stated they are TCK, even though
Right.
they do tell about these interesting lifestyle that incredibly in your word weird kind of
Yeah.
upbringing. So this is something that I really hope that there is a certain giant spotlight to it,
I
and
agree.
just actually highlight this term is called a third culture kid.
Yeah.
It's not about this is a term for their international background, for their
Mm.
unique lifestyle.
Mm.
So yeah, I think this is something that a lot of media, I hope, could be done. If you guys are watching this, please let me know. I'll be happy to consult. Thank you. Okay. I actually want to ask something though with regards to this part, yeah. Uh, what was the thought process when you were creating your book? What was the challenge behind it? Is what you say like the idea that you have at that time for for your supposed idea for a show? Was it part of it? What part of something that you consider when you were writing your book?
When I was writing my book, whether I wanted it to turn into a show.
Well, not when you want to turn it into a show, of course, but
I
maybe
would love for anybody to pick it up and turn it into a show.
let's turn
Sorry,
it
I
into
totally
Netflix.
cut you.
Yeah, no worry, no worry. Let's recommend some people. I actually do have Tony Pietra Arjuna, who is a TCK movie director. So let's
Amazing.
let's give me
Let's
something
connect.
interesting. But
Yeah.
well, okay. So let's say maybe let's simplify it a bit. Yeah, when you were writing your book, right? What was the
Mhm.
challenge behind it? Because for one thing is that like you would have your editors, you would have some of your staff to assist you, right? Or some people
Mhm.
to assist you. But the thing is that may I check? May I ask? Maybe they might not be TCK, so as a
Mhm.
result, they may not understand your thought process going forward.
100%.
So how was it at the time?
100%. So, luckily enough, I was very blessed because my editor is also a TCK. So she's French, but studied in the British system, like for most part of her life, lived in New Zealand for a while. So there's a lot of like these intricacies of the book that she managed to understand very, very well, which I'm very grateful for. The hardest part, I would say, in the writing process, personally, was to put, because it's a memoir after all, right? So I want to be fair to a lot of the people who are involved in the book, as in like the people that I mention, and more specifically my parents and my brother, because I talk a lot about my growing up with them, my relationship with them. Um, there's a lot of demons that you have to fight, obviously, when you write a memoir. A lot of people disagreed with me on many different things, but then at the end of the day, it's my interpretation. I think the hardest thing, hands down, is definitely having my parents, especially my mother, who I'm very close to both of my parents, but my mom is like the biggest reader in life. She reads everything. And so she helped edited part of the book, where she like consulted like on like many different things, like, oh, like this memory or like the way I write a certain paragraph. And I see that there's a huge gap between my parents and myself, right? And I think that's the hardest part to come to terms with, because of the privilege, the blessing that they've blessed me with in my life, and they unfortunately didn't have the same. They didn't grow up in such an international background. And the fact that I'm writing this book in English, it's a huge problem, because my parents, they read English. They don't speak it. They're not as fluent. So they're very sad, of course, that the book's not written in Vietnamese, and even my French teachers are like upset that it's not written in French. And so it's weird, right? Because like I've said before, my mother tongue are Vietnamese and French, I'd say, because I learned both languages when I was 3. And then I only started learning English when I'm 12, and then it's funny how life turns out, that like eventually I'm writing my first book in English. So my parents, of course, I'm going to have to translate it into Vietnamese for them to fully grasp. But yeah, like definitely confronting the fact that the closest people to you, your family members, don't necessarily understand your point of view, don't necessarily share a certain kind of like analysis of your life that they also took part in, I think that's the hardest part. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I get that. I get that. Okay, first off, shout out to Mrs. Nguyen. You should be proud of your daughter. She's also now doing a live
Right.
interview. Yay. Yeah, I'm actually glad that Kevin actually knows about your book and is a big fan of it. So, what he is actually one of the person who actually inspired the creation of the show. So
Right.
before I started doing this, I actually was writing some articles. At that time, I
Mhm.
used pop culture influences in order to depict some of the issue that I have
Mm.
in dealing with cultural shock. So at that time,
Yeah.
he told me, however, that but you are not representing the entire viewpoint of these kind of third culture kids. You are only
Right.
representing of yourself who grew up, who left a developed country to a still developing country, which is supposed to be your passport country. There's still
Mm.
other kind of portfolios such as parachute babies, missionary kids. So at that time, I actually decided to change the style. Is that why don't I invite these very people, tell your own story? It's not. It's I don't need any kind of professional qualification for it. All I need to do
Right.
is just have a mic, a camera access, and tada, there you are.
Yeah.
Just to let
Yeah.
you guys know, this mic is actually has a one busted leg stand, but the thing is because I hold it this way, and then I tell people that this is a tribute to Freddie Mercury, who's also a teacher himself.
That's a yeah. Good one.
Thank you. All right, moving on. But yeah, I really get it. Is that I guess is because as you grow older, you tend to realize that your parents are actually facing their own sets of challenges as they were raising you. And in a sense, well, I don't think it's, of course, there's any kind of personal animosity, but of course, there's a certain envy for to yourself because they don't get to experience what you did. And well, they work hard to be able to provide it for you. But the fact that you grow up in a way that, in a sense, is a little counterculture to them. So it makes them question is that am I doing the right thing? I thought I've just given them the best thing that I can give them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is actually something that the younger generation I think should be anticipating. Is because
Hmm.
well, everybody grow up in a different way. Everybody express themselves in a different way, and the thing
Yeah.
is that well, at the end of the day, though, we still are defined by quite the common kind of value. But the thing
Uh-huh.
is that how we present it might not be the same.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Okay. I have two more questions for you, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first question is that with how our life is now turned into relying on digital equipments in order for us to be able to interact and in order for us to even work. How do you feel that under a greater awareness for intercultural lifestyle, the TCK lifestyle, could help to be used as a guideline on living on the internet?
Wait, sorry, I'm not sure I understand correctly the
Oh, yeah, no
question.
worries, no worries. Yeah, so in the earlier part of this interview, because I mentioned nowadays there's a unique trend of like remote working, whereby you are now able to employ people who are living in a different country in order to assist with your work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel though? Because if let's say if more people, more employer are aware of an intercultural lifestyle, how do you
Mm-hmm.
think that they will fare better when they are working with people internationally?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think that they will definitely, it will absolutely improve, in the long run, because everything, like you've said, is connected. Just like the fact that you're in Jakarta right now, I'm in Paris, and we met virtually, and we're having uh, I would say quite a deep conversation about identities and such. It's not something that I would just tell the next person. It's not something that even with my closest friends, we don't even sit down and like have this kind of discussion. So that just goes to show that, these kind of interactions will be more and more frequent, will be more and more, will take place more and more every day. And given the circumstances, actually, I think thanks to the internet, of course, it brings all of us together to be working with people from all walks of life, and like very diverse people, not only in terms of nationality, in terms of like where we're based, but people who might not have access to, like all of the things, to all of the, even I would venture to say, even like the economic backgrounds, or like all of the different studies that we've all been doing. So I think, yeah, like definitely it will help a lot. I think even like, like the corporate cultures, even the working cultures, people who are forced, for lack of better words, to do this kind of working because of the current situation of the sanitary situation, will also learn themselves. Like I would say, not with all due respect to like the older, slightly older generation who are also learning to work this way, they too will learn a lot from it. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So before I get into that, I actually just want to clear up the final question. Okay. What do you hope though for your book, Weird Culture Kids, to be influencing for the younger generations of TCK? And I actually do know an adult who actually is a big fan of your book. So you can also say for the current generations of TCKs who
Of
are now
course.
adults. Yay.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think it's I call it weird culture kids, right? Because I think like there's always, sorry, a part of kids within us, right, that we carry until today. Like I think I'm still that kid that I once was like 20 years ago. Slightly different, more mature, but the essence is still there.
If
So
anybody
of
want to
course,
ask Ngoc's age, please leave in the comment box. Thank you.
still very young, guys. But essentially, of course, like the hope is for other weird culture kids and third culture kids who feel lonely out there, um, to feel less lonely, because essentially the reason why I started writing this book is because, like I've told you, I felt lonely, I felt weird, I felt different from the rest of the world. And after actually, like through the process of writing this book, I actually really realized that, because I carried out over 100 different interviews while as a research for this book, and I've realized that the biggest lessons I've learned is that, each and every single individuals that I've interviewed, some of are my dearest of friends, some are like the strangers that I've met on the internet, have told me that, they feel very rootless, right? They don't have any roots in any kind of country, and that's the feeling, the most constant feeling that they have. And I'd love for them, and like, of course, I'd explain to them that Weird Culture Kids is a project not only to save myself, but also, to share with everyone that despite and beyond their rootlessness, beyond their feeling of unbelonging, there exists a tribe for them. And that's the tribe and that's the community and the tribe that I'd love to build of Weird Culture Kids out there who should never feel that they don't belong anywhere, because there is a tribe out there that exists. And that one day, those kids, right, if I'm talking specifically to kids who grew up, they will learn that it's actually a superpower. It's actually really cool, man, to be a Weird Culture Kid. And at times it might not feel that way, but you'll reap all the benefits from it once you realize how to embrace it. And
Yep. Okay, I love that. I love that. Just to let you guys know, like for the beginning of this title, "Don't Fit In, Stand Out," is actually uttered by the great Stan Lee, who passed away a few years back. So one of his most proudest creation is of course the X-Men, which of course tells a bunch of mutants who are excluded from society. So that's the earliest part about it. And and what Ngoc said is something that a lot of my guests has actually uttered too. There is no shame in being a TCK. In fact, it is the proudest thing you can ever get. It's because, well, you may, yes, for lack of a better term, when you are younger, it can be a bitch. It can be a bitch. I felt that way until I was 16 to 17. But after that is that as you get older, you realize it's the biggest blessing you can have in your life. Yes, you can say you are rootless, but not having a root allows you to belong everywhere. You look at things from two sides of the coin, and as a result, you become a better person for it. It's because you don't need to feel that there's a certain biasness to a certain ideal. But the thing is that if an ideal that is different can actually benefit you in the long run, why don't you use it?
Yeah.
All right. I agree. I really, really agree. All right. So that's actually all the questions I have. So first off, I need to send a thanks to Mr. Eugene Savinon. How are you, my friend? I saw you a few days ago. So thank you for tuning in. So there's of course Mr. Puji, and last but definitely not least, and that is Kevin himself. So, oh, what is this? Oh, grateful it is in English. Yeah.
Great.
All right. Yeah, and of course, I need to thank you for coming in today. Thank you so much for giving in your time. Is there anything you want to tell the viewers?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you as well, Calvin, for having me. And this is such a great show. I really enjoyed my talk with you. Thank you for the initiative. It's very important to raise awareness about it's not an issue, but this type of hybrid identity that's becoming more and more prevalent in today's globalized and diverse world. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And yeah, if you guys want to connect, I'm very friendly. Don't hesitate to connect. I'd love to hear back from you if you happen to read the book Weird Culture Kids that I authored recently. Any feedback is welcomed. And yeah, thank you for listening.
All right. Ngoc's social media link is already in the description box. I've linked in both her Instagrams and of course the website where you can also get where you can also order order Weird Culture Kids. So other than that, yeah, everybody do enjoy your 2021. Please don't feel like if let's say it's been slow for you, don't need to worry about it. Life is a marathon. It's not a race. So with that, do take care, everyone, and have a good day or night.
Have a good one. Bye, guys.
Mm-hmm.